Hello, amateurs, and welcome back to our Six Nations series. And this is the first in a new feature called the Referees Review. And I've got amateur referee here, Matt Groves, with me. Matt, how are you doing?
Very well, thanks, Tim. How you doing?
Very good. Fresh from a weekend of refereeing. A couple of games this weekend for you?
Yes, Colts game on Saturday, which is actually a really good game. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And then this morning, a belter touring team up from Ruislip finished 57-31. So yeah, lots of running around and lots of tries being scored.
Wonderful stuff. That's what we like to hear. Now, let's get into this Six Nations and some of the interesting law things that have happened this weekend. But before the weekend even happened, we had the announcement of some law variations. So the line-out law initially, let's talk about that one first. What is this new line-out law? And we'll go from there.
So it's one that I think we've actually discussed briefly when we spoke last year, which is that if the throw isn't straight at the line out, but the non-throwing team elect not to compete, then the throw doesn't need to be perfectly straight. Now, there are some obviously, it's a matter of law, therefore there's some delicious areas of grey and things are left to interpretation. But the intent of the law is what we need to focus on, which is the intent is to avoid a secondary stop in play that doesn't need to happen. So if the throw is straight enough and it's not competed, play on. Which at the grassroots we tend to do anyway. If it's not competitive but it's not perfectly straight, then we just crack on, because otherwise we then have to set a scrum, which is going to take 30 seconds at least to form. At the grassroots, probably a bit longer, and you've stopped the throw in the play. So why not just let it carry on? And that's exactly what these now come in with the global law trial. So if the throw's not straight but it's not competed, we're going to crack on. It's important to note for anyone that's watching this in England, these global law trials apply to competitions that have not already started. So the Six Nations have not already started from the 1st of January. Therefore, it applies to the Six Nations, but these do not apply to the game that you'll see down at your local club on a Saturday, because those competitions were started before the start of this year. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. It does. And we saw this line-out law several times, I think, this weekend. I kind of lost count, actually. And you could tell it was in operation because the referees were verbalizing it when they saw it happen, which I think maybe that'll fade away as time goes on. But I think it was good that they were verbalizing it this first weekend.
No, completely. Because I think it's not only good for the players, because the players are having to adapt to these new laws as well, particularly those that are playing in their domestic competitions where they've not been playing these laws. So it's good for the officials to help the players out. But when it comes to the big stage of the Six Nations, the other thing is to help out the fans. There's hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people watching these games, some of whom won't be that savvy with the laws, and therefore helping everyone along with the understanding can only be a good thing.
Absolutely. And what is your opinion about how it went this weekend with this law?
I think it's absolutely perfect. I think it's completely the right thing to do. I would suspect that a lot of referees at the top flight would have wanted to do it anyway, because they're wanting to create the best possible product that they can, and stopping the game for little silly things is not what really that they want to be about. So yeah, I think it's been big tick in the box, big success.
I completely agree. I think a lot of people have been talking about this law for a long time. And as you say, grassroots referees have been implementing it for a long time as well. So I think that one's very popular. One that is definitely dividing opinion, though, is the new protection laws around the scrum half. Could you just describe exactly what that is? And then we'll go into how that played out this weekend as well.
Sure. So there's an aspect that covers specifically the scrum half, because it's to do with the scrums. The other, although in the wording, certainly in the communications that have come out from World Rugby, they do refer to the 9. They don't mean the guy wearing 9. They mean whoever is there at the base of the ruck or at the base of the maul, acting in that scrum half capacity. It doesn't matter what shirt number they're wearing, even though World Rugby have specifically said 9 in all their communications. But so at the scrum time, it basically makes the game the same as, again, anyone watching from England will be familiar with this with under 15s, both boys and girls, because it basically makes the senior game, the adult game, the same as the junior game, whereby the 9 scrum half can't go beyond the tunnel. So 9s are always interesting players to referee, because they tend to try and get away with a lot of things. and to be honest, they can get away with a lot of things because of the nature of playing 9. And so all of those issues of nines reaching, slapping the ball out from the opposite man at the base of the scrum, all those go away because you've just got that extra bit of space, extra bit of time to play the ball away from the scrum. I can understand why people think it's not a good idea, because it then allows you to be less competent as a 9, as an 8, for example, and still get good quality possession. But I think fundamentally it's just going to help tidy things up. So I'm actually in support of that one. The other two aspects of it are ruck time and maul. So it's anyone who has been part of, and this again is the interesting wording from World Rugby, that it's about who has been part of the ruck or the maul, cannot interfere with a player near the ruck. And near, they use the same terminology as they did with the law where you can't dive on the ball as it emerges from a ruck, and they said near the ruck, and they've clarified that as meaning a meter. They mean a meter here as well. So if you've been part of the ruck, you can't then interfere with the 9. So again, it's about providing the 9 that extra little bit of time and space to get the ball away so that we can have more continuity and a higher quality game of rugby. Same with the maul. What they've also, World Rugby have actually clarified in the FAQs with this as well, is if a player does leave the ruck or maul, retires back into an onside position, they're no longer classed as having just left the ruck or the maul, and they can then move forward once the ball has left the ruck or the maul, and they can then challenge the 9. But they must do that from an onside position. But it's the scenarios, again, it's about the intent of what they're trying to do with the law, which is to clean up the game, make it more have greater continuity, and to stop those situations, particularly at the maul. I find it frustrating where you've got players that deliberately plan to get themselves into an awful position that they just hold on and then almost swing their body round so that they are ball side as a defender, that they're ball side, so that as soon as the ball emerges from the maul, they've already stolen 2 or 3 meters of the depth of the maul in order to then put pressure onto the 9 and 10. And it's to stop that kind of behaviour, which again I'm fully in support of. We saw it a few times through the course of the games this weekend. Again, I think it's a big tick in the box in terms of what World Rugby have done. I think it's a good idea. I do have some empathy with the people that don't like it, as I can see why, particularly the scrum side of things. But from a ruck and a maul, it's the right thing to do. Ruck and maul, scrum. Yeah, I think it's the right thing. But that's where I do have some empathy with people who don't agree with it. But I think they're wrong.
Yeah, because on the scrum one, the law was changed a few years back, which meant the scrum half had to stay behind the ball, didn't it? Because before they could almost come all the way round to the back foot, and that cleared up a lot of stuff. And to be honest, you don't see many, or you hadn't seen many, much interference at the back of scrums really since that law had been in place. But this will just clear up any more of that whatsoever.
And from an official's perspective, it makes it a lot easier to officiate, because you no longer need to be, assessing does the guy have 2 feet behind the ball, because if you're a relatively tall 9, you can still have 2 feet behind the ball, but reach and be causing a nuisance as well. So yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one because rugby's full of areas of the game where you are deliberately trying to cheat or gain an advantage somehow. Yes. And there's lots of players who make it there, who are really specialists at this kind of thing. I think I'm inclined to agree with you though, Matt. That whole thing around the back of the maul, where somebody can just be there legally bound into the maul, but then as soon as that ball comes out, they can just sort of tackle or grab an arm or something like that. It seemed anti-competitive to me. Like it seemed wrong. So if it cuts out those, I think I'm a fan of it as well. Yeah. Now, did anybody get penalised for it this weekend? I feel like somebody did, but I can't remember who or when.
Not that I can recall. They probably did do when we've had three games of rugby. So I'd be surprised if there wasn't a mistake. But I guess what the officials will be doing at that level will be they'll be trying to manage the way around it. So because we've got obviously the ref comms now, you hear what the match officials are saying, and anything that was getting close to that kind of infringement, they would have been using a preventative call to manage their way through it, to avoid the penalty, to avoid having to stop the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is a question from one of you guys, one of the listeners on the YouTube channel. And this is Mr. Greg O'Brien, who asked, on the disallowed try, and this is the Ronan Kelleher try for Ireland, was Itoje not part of the ruck and therefore Byrne entitled to hold him?
That's a very, very good question. So I'd need to look at the footage again to see if Maro was part of the ruck or not. But to a large extent, it's not massively relevant. I thought it was a great call, by the way. So that's obviously coming from the TMO. They've been looking at this delayed footage, or he's done a quick replay to see it. There's no way that any of the team of three on field will have been in a position to have seen that. So TMO's done his job there very well. So the Irish player was second row, wasn't it? Was it Byrne?
Byrne, yeah.
Yeah, he was off his feet. So in the game of rugby, if you're off your feet, you're out of the game. You can take no active part in the game at all. So he's off his feet, he's holding a player, and is therefore preventing a player taking the action that they want to take, which is to step sideways and plug the gap in the guard position at the side of the ruck. There are some interesting vagaries. So in order to be part of a ruck, you need to be bound on, because that's part of the definition of being in the ruck. However, he's off his feet. So at that point, he's out of the game completely. Therefore, it doesn't actually matter whether Maro was part of the ruck or not. The Irishman was off his feet, cannot take any active part in the game, and therefore, yes, correct call was made by the officials.
Yeah, I mean, the officials wasted very little time in coming to that conclusion as well. So it wasn't even really any kind of a debate for them. It seemed like very clear cut. And that was my opinion as well, exactly what you've just described. Okay, the next one, and this is something that definitely brought a lot of attention over the opening night, was the wonderful break by Antoine Dupont, but more importantly, the pass that followed to Atisogbe for France's third try. Now, what do you want to share about this, Matt?
So this was one that at the time when I was watching the game around at a friend's house, and in real time, I went, "Ooh, they're probably going to want to check that." And then they didn't, or the TMO checked it in real time and made a live call that the pass was fine. When you look at the replay, and particularly the different angles, then you see the ball, and it's one of those that without wanting to get too deep into the physics of it, it's made to look like a really bad forward pass, because at the point that Dupont passes the ball, he is in field of the 5 meter line, and the winger catches it comfortably over the 5 meter line, probably 2 to 3 meters. Therefore, it looks like it's a massive forward pass because the ball has gone forward 2 or 3 meters. But that's when you look at it relative to the grass. Whereas actually the ball traveling forward in terms of that kind of pass is relative to the players. And the analogy that I would always use when I explain this to someone is, if you're on a train, sat next to your friend, or sat opposite your friend, and you throw a bag of crisps or whatever at them, then relative to you, that pass, that bag of crisps or newspaper or whatever it is that you've just thrown has obviously gone in a certain direction. So if you throw it over your shoulder to your mate, it's going to go backwards relative to you. If I'm stood outside the train, that looks massively forward, doesn't it? Because the bag of crisps has gone from there to there because of the relativity of being on the train as opposed to off the train. And that's exactly what we're looking at when it comes to the players. So the both of those players, and they were putting, Dupont's quick. So, he would have been moving at probably 9 to 10 meters per second at that point. He was shifting. So the ball forward relative to the grass. However, the two players, both of them moving forward very quickly, the ball travels backwards relative to the players. Therefore, not a forward pass.
Yeah, great explanation. And I've got to say, my initial reaction was exactly the same of yours. And I think it was something to do as well with just like the floatiness of the pass. I think just added to the illusion that it had to be forward somehow. But if you look at the footage, you can see that I think Dupont is actually over the goal line when Atisogbe catches the ball. So in sort of in relative terms, which is what we're dealing with here, it wasn't actually even close.
No, and it's great that he got the pass away. I was a little bit disappointed that he didn't just hold on and ground it, because I've got Dupont in my fantasy team, so I wanted him to be scoring. But hey ho, you can't have everything, can you?
Just a load of assists instead.
Yes.
Yeah, it's constant, isn't he? Absolutely constant. Okay, hopefully that will clear up, listeners, for just a few little bits and pieces from the weekend. And
Yep.
as always, this is not a forum to bag referees. We're just trying to get a better understanding of the laws and, importantly, how they're applied, because there is always some thought process behind it with the referee. It's rarely black or white. There are some things that are black or white, but there's lots of grey as well. So we're just trying to improve that understanding of the laws across the game. So hopefully referees don't get, the continued sort of abuse, which is actually has been the case going forward. So that's our intent with this. And I thank you, Matt, very much for helping us out with that.
My pleasure.
Amazing. And let's have your questions, guys. If you've got any more questions about the things that we talked about tonight or any other law questions, and particularly if you see one in a game next weekend, drop it in on one of the videos in the comments. I'll read them all and we'll discuss it on the Sunday night and get those answers over to you and hopefully just improve the understanding. While you're down in the comments, give this video a thumbs up while you're down there. It helps other people find it. And it just leaves me to say, Matt, thank you very much again for your time today.
Lovely. Nice to talk to you again, Tim.
You too. And people at home, you can subscribe there. You can watch that one next. And don't forget to get out and play.